Hello and welcome to Show Studios Autumn Winter 24 reviews for the Fashion Week season. We're going to be bringing you these weekly roundups from Florence, Milan and Paris to talk to you about some of the biggest themes coming up and generally how the menswear landscape is looking, what's changing, what stayed the same, generally what you should be looking out for and some of our kind of key takeaways. Pitti Uomo, which is the menswear trade show fair in Florence and happens twice a year, is a really great place to start. So this takes place in January and June, and it's a great place to start because it's a great place to come and see actually the realities of menswear. Pitti Uomo is primarily for buyers. It's really for kind of that business part of the kind of industry. It's for press too, but mainly for these buyers. The main kind of bulk of Pitti, which lasts for 3 days, is this kind of hub of hundreds and hundreds of stalls, where kind of buyers will go, experience and kind of discover new brands, buy a certain amount of stock for their next season, that sort of thing. It's a very big part of this is kind of for sales. And you know, Fashion Week and fashion shows are for press and for buyers in the same respect, but Pitti Uomo feels very serious in a kind of different respect. But as part of Pitti Uomo, they always put on these guest shows where designers come in and do kind of runway shows, and there's usually one or two a season. And since 2019, the brilliant Francesca Taccioni has been head of special projects, and Francesca's really put a focus on thinking more about those underdogs in the industry. So in the past, we've had people like Rick Owens doing shows, as well as the kind of Craig Greens, those sort of brands. But yeah, since 2019, it's been more of a focus on these underdogs. So we've had Wells Bonner, Martine Rose, brands that, you know, for us based in London, are kind of firmly on our radar, some of our biggest brands on our schedule, but may have been kind of lesser known to kind of a wider press and buyers kind of scope in Europe and also in the US. And Pitti and Florence is a great opportunity and space for these brands to get that exposure, because, you know, especially because of that exposure, but also because you really sense while you're here that people here are, the press here and the buyers here are really obsessed with clothes. It's not about peacocking, and well, it is actually a lot about peacocking. The outfits are kind of incredible that people wear, but you know, there's a difference between, I think, especially men's fashion week and women's fashion week, that at women's you see a lot more of people being there to be seen, while as at men's it's a lot of kind of actually being here to obsess over the clothes, and kind of the details that clothes are actually ultimately for living in. And both of the guest designers this season really captured that. So we had Stephen Stokey Daly, his namesake labels, S.S Daley, and then Luca Magliano, whose brand is called Magliano. Stephen has been kind of, since he graduated from Westminster in 2020, and his graduate collection featured in Harry Styles' music video, styled by Harry Lambert. He's kind of just gone from strength to strength, you know, being stocked in matches, almost from the get-go. And then last year he won the LVMH prize. He's known for kind of those sellout unisex, kind of beautiful wide palazzo pants, the intarsia knitwear, all through this aesthetic and this idea of kind of playing with ideas of British uniform, especially British uniform that's kind of situated within the ideas of British class systems. So that first graduate collection was inspired by Stephen, who's from Liverpool, kind of walking to college in London and going past Harrow School, which is kind of an elite British boys boarding school, and kind of observing their uniforms, their ways of being, these, you know, also kind of that led him into thinking about things like Brideshead Revisited, you know, all of those kind of elitist class spaces, but also kind of stories of kind of suppressed homoeroticism, all of kind of, that's kind of this kind of thread of narrative which runs through Stephen's work, and it was so interesting to see him bring that to Florence. He held his show in this beautiful kind of frescoed hallway, and we had these kind of abstract sculptures of piles of pillows through the centre of the room, which was a more abstract take on the set design that we've seen Stephen do previously, but that still plays with this idea of kind of, it hints to the idea of the interiors of boarding schools, you know, boarding rooms, and this idea of, he was thinking about kind of boys landing here in British boys kind of landing in Italy, thinking about M. Forster's 1911 novella, and also thinking about echoes of Dafydd Jones, the photographer who did this series of photographs in the 80s of British high society, so kind of Cambridge end of year balls. And there's a particularly great photo that he did in that this series called The Last Hurrah of a kind of student in his tailcoat sliding down a marquee. Kind of, you can tell it's the early hours, people are kind of sitting on the lawn with cigarettes and tuxedo jackets swung over their shoulders. This kind of, those hints of kind of British eccentric kind of nature, and the debauchery of kind of parties, and the debauchery that goes on in this closeted world of kind of British elitism. And, you know, it was just interesting to see that all come into this world of kind of Florence, the heart of the Renaissance, the heart of, and the source of like so much of the history of art, you know, under these kind of these frescoes and this kind of Mannerist interior. Yeah, really just a beautiful but perfectly balanced mix of kind of time periods, contrasts, references. The opening look felt very much a reference to Dafydd Jones, with the kind of, it was this tailcoat but then with no trousers on, and just a white silk neck scarf, you know. And this collection was about Stephen kind of consolidating some of the key kind of archetypes that he really has had since that graduate collection, some of those key kind of ideas, but building upon them and showing a real kind of maturity, both in really putting his weight behind the kind of really top end kind of construction and materials that he uses. So kind of intarsia knitwear, beautiful little cardigans, one with kind of this jumping lamb across it, but then also kind of tapestry capes, real kind of a much, in my opinion, the use of silk in this collection I much preferred than previous seasons, because it had kind of either a sense of structure in kind of quilted padded jackets and shorts, or felt rightly balanced in terms of kind of, you'd have floating pajama pants with archival kind of floral prints that Stephen had sourced, and then that was paired with kind of chocolate brown tailored coat which had a beautiful shearling collar to it. And you know, there's this beautiful mix of kind of fabrications and textures and colour, but it felt kind of concise and contained, and like a really considered kind of proposal. Also considered in terms of, this was focusing back on menswear, having done women's wear for the past few seasons. I think Stephen's clothes are so kind of easy to be unisex that actually it's, you know, especially kind of, he's on his kind of 8th collection, I think this is, it's still such early days for Stephen despite his kind of huge success. And I think that this collection was definitely a step in the right direction to actually refocusing on some of those codes and pushing them to the next level. This was definitely the best S.S Daley collection yet. And to top it off was this brilliant soundtrack by the punkish South London band, Dry Cleaning, and that kind of almost spoken word element to the like Brits voices like coming into this kind of very Italian kind of traditional space, with the kind of broken down archetypes in the clothing, was really nice, because it both carried on this kind of theatric spoken word element that we've had in previous Stephen Stokey Daley runway shows and presentations, but it also just put kind of that Britishness and that kind of, that almost punkish attitude that Stephen does have, despite the classicism of his kind of clothes and the romanticism of them, kind of, it put it front and center. So yeah, really brilliant show from Stephen. And then of course we had Magliano by Luca Magliano. You know, Stephen won the LVMH prize last year, and at that LVMH Awards, Luca was awarded the Karl Lagerfeld Special Prize. Luca's been designing his brand since 2016, and in the past few years it really feels like it's reached a new strength. He started working with a brand accelerator a couple of years ago to kind of help the brand expand their distribution for sales. they've kind of got a really good basis of sales in Asia and America as well as Europe as well. And he told me something really interesting last year when I spoke to him, which was that he really wants to represent an Italy that is often untold but exists. So in a similar way to Stephen, who's also looking at class from his perspective, and it's a personal kind of act of storytelling, but kind of with an element of fantasy to it. Luca's doing the same thing, but I think there's a different and very interesting, when we're talking about these together, element of reality to what Luca's doing, because Luca's from Bologna, and he always talks about this idea of representing the Italian working class, the real Italian person. His casting always is partly street cast. He brings back the same faces again and again. They're very carefully choreographed in the way that they kind of walk very slowly down the runway and they turn and engage with you as an audience. And this kind of show at Pitti Uomo was another very concise meditation on kind of the classic Magliano archetypes of tailoring, shirting, kind of these twists on those on the classic things that you could recognize in your own wardrobe, that the average person can see in their own wardrobe, but made special, considered, reconfigured with this very considered kind of language of menswear, which is really, really what came through with this show. And the favourite elements were kind of the drawstring details on big ballooning jackets, and also around the waist of tailoring and kind of in kind of tailored jackets to twist them and bring a level of interest. Sleeves on tailored jackets were raw and revealed, kind of as if the lining was leather, so it revealed a layer of black leather underneath. And very clever UGG collaboration, very global consumerist brand, somewhat at odds with the ideas that Magliano is playing with, but actually worked really well. They were kind of these slip-on Uggs, and paired with the kind of to the floor raw hem trousers, and very clever styling with lots of different layers. It actually really, really worked. One of my favourite looks was this look with the low scoop cardigan, styled over a kind of napkin checkerboard shirt, and then to the ankle wool navy blue skirt. And yeah, I just love that look because it's this great it's that great sensibility of real world life styling and pieces that you could pull apart and put in your own wardrobe, but are so desirable when you see them there on the runway in this kind of almost theatrical setting. We had the models kind of coming down from this almost spotlight through the smoke, down through the back of this kind of, we were in this kind of, Magliano likes to set you in these kind of dark cavernous spaces, and we were in this kind of massive theatre, but we were facing the seating, and some of the seating was kind of reconfigured into sculptural kind of formations, which is something that Luca's done previously. Chairs are kind of something that come back again and again. I remember a Milan show where Luca kind of, the set was these kind of mounted chairs on top of each other, and Luca's spoken about this idea that chairs are kind of a representation of people, whether they're absent or whether they're present. And I think it's interesting, to think about that idea, that he keeps coming back to the same ideas in kind of his set design and, with his casting, and then you think about Stephen coming back to some of those archetypes, really pulling stuff back in. And I think, for both of these brands and designers who were seeing such well-deserved kind of economic success, but also kind of success in the press and kind of getting more of a kind of a wider consumer awareness and base, that actually it's because they both have such a clear point of view, and they've known what they want to say, and they're also speaking something that's very personal and real and close to home, and that's why it resonates with people, and why these shows and these collections were such brilliant successes and such a positive way, I think, to start the season. And I think it'll be interesting to see how the season progresses, because it's hard, to see. We have enough clothes in the world. There's so many shows on the schedule. And so it's a real treat, actually, I think, as someone who's reviewing these shows, but also someone who loves clothes and is, wanting to feel inspired, by what I see on the runway, and thinking, oh, maybe I'd want to try that in my wardrobe, or, emulate that styling, or just feeling inspired with it as kind of a creative form of expression, to start the season with two shows that really feel like they hit that nail on the head. So yes, I will be back very soon with Milan. So please comment below any costumes, any questions that you might have. You know, we've got Prada coming up, we've got D Squared, we've got JW Anderson, lots of shows over the weekend. So yeah, comment any questions that you want me to answer, and I will do so when we come back with our next roundup, which should be going live on Monday. So I'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Bye.